Book of Heaven, Volume 19, 27th to the 31st August 1926. Page 170 to 178. August 27, 1926. Jesus gives the title to the book about his will. As I was in my usual state, my always lovable Jesus made me see the Reverend Father who must occupy himself with the printing of the writings on the adorable will of God. And Jesus, placing himself near him, said to him, "My son, the title you will give to the book you will print about my will is this: The kingdom of my divine will in the midst of creatures." Book of Heaven, the call of the creature to the order, the place and the purpose for which he was created by God. See, I want the title also to correspond to the great work of my will. I want the creature to comprehend that his place, assigned to him by God, is in my will, and until he enters into it, he will be without place, without order, without purpose. He will be an intruder in the creation, with no right at all, and therefore he will go wandering without peace, without inheritance. And I, moved to compassion for him, will cry out to him continuously, "Enter into your place, come into the order, come to take your inheritance, to live in your house." Why do you want to live in a foreign house? Why do you want to occupy a land that is not yours? And because it is not yours, you live unhappy, and you are the servant and the laughing stock of all created things. All things created by me, because they remain in their place, are in order and in perfect harmony, with all the fullness of their goods, assigned to them by God. You alone want to be unhappy, but of a voluntary unhappiness. Therefore come to your place, it is there that I call you and await you. Therefore, he or she who will offer to make my will known, will be my spokesperson, and I will entrust to them the secrets of its kingdom. Then, after this, he showed the whole creation, how all created things remain in their place, wanted by God, and therefore in perfect order and in perfect harmony among themselves. And because they remain in their place, the Supreme Will maintains their existence whole, beautiful, fresh and ever new, and order brings communal happiness and universal strength to all. What enchantment to see the order, the harmony of all creation. And Jesus, resuming his speaking, added, "My daughter, how beautiful are our works! They are our honor and our perennial glory. All of them remain at their place, and each created thing fulfills its office perfectly. Man alone is our dishonor in our creative work, because by withdrawing from our will, he walks upside down, with his head down on the earth and his feet up in the air." What disorder! What disorder! It is disgusting to see him. By walking with his head upside down, he crawls on the earth, he becomes all upset, he transforms himself. His sight lacks the necessary span to be able to look, he cannot move around in space in order to know things, nor defend himself if his enemy is behind his shoulders, and he cannot go too far, because, poor one, he has to drag himself with his head instead of walking, because the office of walking belongs to the feet, while that of the head is to dominate. So, doing his own will is the true and perfect tumble of man, and the disorder of the human family. This is why I care so much that my will be known, so that he may return to his place, no longer dragging himself with his head upside down, but walking on his feet, no longer forming my dishonor in his, but my honor in his. Look, yourself. Do creatures not look ugly, in seeing them walk with their heads on the ground? Don't you too feel sorry in seeing them so disordered? I looked, and I saw the heads down and the feet up in the air. Jesus disappeared, and I remained looking at this ugly scene of the human generations, and from the heart I prayed that his will may be known. August 29, 1926. Only the Supreme Will possesses the nature of true good. Blessing of Jesus of the title to be given to the writings about his most holy will. My poor mind is always returning to the supreme center of the eternal will, and if sometimes I think about something else, Jesus himself, with the speaking of his, calls my attention to crossing the unending sea of his most holy will. So, since I was thinking about something else, my sweet Jesus, jealous, clasped me to himself and told me, "My daughter, always in my will do I want you, because in it is the nature of good. Only when a good never ends and has no beginning and no end, then can it be called true good. When it has its beginning and its end, a good is full of bitternesses, of fear, of anxiety, and also of disillusion. All this renders good itself unhappy, and many times one passes easily from the good of riches to miseries, from fortune to misfortune, from health to sickness, because all the goods that have a beginning are unstable, fleeting, short-lived, and end up in nothing. It is my supreme will that possesses the nature of true good, because it has no beginning and no end, and therefore its good is always the same, always full, always stable, not subject to any change. This is why all that the soul makes enter into the supreme will, all of her acts formed in it, acquire the nature of true good, because they are done in a stable, immovable will, which contains eternal and immeasurable goods. So, your love, your prayer, your thanksgivings and everything you can do, take their place in an eternal beginning that never ends, and therefore acquire the fullness of the nature of good. So, your prayer acquires full value and complete fruit, in such a way that you yourself will not be able to comprehend where the fruits and the goods of your prayer will extend. It will go around throughout eternity, it will give itself to all, and at the same time it will remain always full in its effects. Your love acquires the nature of true love, of that unshakable love that never fails, that never ends, that loves all, gives itself to all, and remains always with the fullness of good of the nature of true love, and so with all the rest. To everything that enters into my will, the creative power of my will communicates its own nature and converts it into its own acts, because it does not tolerate having within itself acts dissimilar from its own. Therefore it can be said that the acts of the creature done in my will enter the inscrutable ways of God, nor can anyone know all of their innumerable effects. That which has no beginning and no end renders itself incomprehensible to created minds, which have a beginning, because since the power of an act that has no beginning is missing in them, all the divine things and everything that enters my will render themselves impenetrable and inscrutable. See then, the great good of operating in my will, to what high place it raises the creature, how she is given back the nature of good, just as she was delivered from the womb of her Creator. On the other hand, anything that can be done outside of my will, be it even good, cannot be called true good, first of all, because the divine nourishment and its light are missing, and these acts are dissimilar from my acts, taking away from the soul the likeness of the divine image. In fact, it is my will alone that makes her grow in my likeness. Once my will is removed, the best is removed, the greatest value of the human works. Therefore those are works emptied of substance, of life and of value. They are like plants without fruit, food without substance, statues without life, works without retribution, which tire the limbs of the strongest. Oh, how great is the difference between operating in my will and operating without it. Therefore, be attentive, and do not give me this sorrow of making me see even one act in you which does not give of my likeness. After this, he disappeared, but he came back a little later, as though restless because of offenses received. Taking refuge in me, he wanted to take rest, and I said to him, "My love, I have many things to tell you, many things to establish between you and me. I must ask of you that your will be known and that its kingdom have its full triumph. If you rest, I cannot tell you anything, I must be silent to let you rest." And Jesus, interrupting my speaking, with unspeakable tenderness pressed me so very tightly to himself, and kissing me told me, "My daughter, how beautiful on your lips is the prayer for the triumph of the kingdom of the supreme will. It is the echo of my own prayer, of my sighs and of all my works. Now I want to see what you wrote about the title to be given to the writings about my will." And as he was saying this, he took this book in his hands, and he seemed to be reading what is written on August 27th. As he was reading, he remained pensive, as though placing himself in profound contemplation, in such a way that I did not dare to tell him anything. I could only hear that his heart was beating very, very strongly, almost wanting to explode. Then he pressed the book to his breast, saying, "I bless this title, I bless it from my heart, and I bless all the words that regard my will." And raising his right hand, with enchanting majesty, he pronounced the words of the blessing. Having done this, he disappeared. August 31st, 1926. Just as our Lord issued the creation, so did he issue all the goods contained in the kingdom of his will for the good of creatures. The human will paralyzes the life of the divine will in the soul. I was doing my acts, my little rounds in the holy divine will according to my usual way. I myself see how I can do nothing but go around in it, in my dear inheritance, given to me by my sweet Jesus, in which there is so much to do and to learn, that neither my short life in the exile nor the whole of eternity will be enough for me to fulfill all my offices in this most extensive inheritance, whose boundaries cannot be seen, neither where it begins nor where it ends. And the more one goes around in it, the more new things one learns. However, many things can be seen but cannot be comprehended, and one wants sweet Jesus, that he may give his explanations. Otherwise one admires them, but cannot describe them. So, surprising me while I was doing my acts in his adorable will, my always lovable Jesus told me, "My daughter, look at how many things we issued in creation with our fiat for the good of man's nature. Everything that our will had established to issue, nothing was missing for its fulfillment. Now, just as everything that we were to release in creation was established, and nothing was absent from our roll call, so was everything that we were to issue for the good of souls also established. And in fact, we did issue it, and it was so great as to surpass by thousands and thousands of times all the goods that can be seen in the creation. But both those which were to serve the good of man's nature and those which were to serve the good of his soul, everything remained deposited in our will, because we do not entrust our things to anyone, knowing that our will alone would preserve them for us, whole and beautiful, just as we delivered them from our divine womb. More so, since it alone has the preserving and multiplying power which, while it gives, loses nothing and keeps all things in the place wanted by us. Now, how many things there are in my will which I must give to creatures, but they have to come into its kingdom in order to receive them. Just as the human nature could never partake in the goods of creation if it did not want to live under the heavens and have a place on earth, where the things created by me surround it like a crown. In the same way, if the soul does not come to live under the heaven of my will, in the midst of the goods which our paternal goodness issued in order to make her happy, to embellish her, to enrich her, she will never be able to partake in these goods. They will be as though foreign and unknown for her. More so, since each soul would be a distinct heaven, which our supreme will would delight in adorning with a sun more radiant and with stars brighter than those which can be seen in creation, one more beautiful than the other. See the great difference. For the human nature there is one sun for everyone, while for souls there is a sun for each of them. There is an individual heaven, there is an ever-springing fount, there is a fire that is never extinguished, there is a divine air to be breathed, there is a celestial food that makes the soul grow in an admirable way in the likeness of the one who created her. Oh, how many things my will keeps prepared and has established to give to one who wants to live in its kingdom, under its liberal and sweet regime. It does not want to entrust its goods outside of its kingdom, because it knows that if they get out of its boundaries they will neither be appreciated nor understood. More so, since it alone knows how to preserve and keep its goods alive, and only one who lives in it is capable of comprehending its celestial language, of receiving its gifts, of looking at its beauties, and of forming one single life with my will. On the other hand, one who does not want to live in its kingdom is incapable of comprehending its goods. Her tongue will not be able to speak nor adapt itself to the language of my kingdom, nor will she be able to look at its beauties. On the contrary, she will remain blind because of the intense light that reigns in it. See then, for how long have all the goods that we must give to the children of our supreme fiat been issued from our paternal womb? Everything has been prepared since the time of creation, nor will we withdraw because of the delay. We will keep waiting. No sooner than the creature places her will as the footstool of ours to let it dominate, will we open the doors for her, to let her enter, because it was the human will that closed the doors to ours and opened the doors to miseries, to weaknesses, to passions. It was not her memory or her intelligence that placed themselves against their Creator, even though they concurred, but it was the human will that had its first act and broke all the bonds, all the relations with a will so holy. More so, since all good and all evil is enclosed in it, the regime, the dominion is its own. And so once the will has failed in good, everything fails, loses order, decays from its origin, becomes ugly. And since it was the human will that placed itself against mine, causing all goods to fail man, this is why I want his will, and in exchange I want to give him mine, to give back to him all the goods that had failed him. Therefore, my daughter, be attentive, never give life to your will if you want mine to reign in you. After this he kept silent, remaining all afflicted because of the great evil produced in creatures by the human will, to the point of disfiguring his beautiful image, infused in them in creating them. And, sighing, he added, My daughter, the human will paralyzes the life of my will in the soul, because without my will the divine life does not circulate in the soul, which, more than pure blood, preserves her motion, her vigor, the perfect use of all mental faculties, in such a way as to make her grow healthy and holy, so that we may recognize our likeness in her. How many souls paralyzed without my will! What a pitiful scene, to see the human generations almost all paralyzed in the soul, and therefore irrational, blind for seeing good, deaf for listening to the truth, mute for teaching it, inert for holy works, immobile in walking on the path of heaven. Because the human will, preventing the circulation of my will, forms the general paralysis in the souls of creatures. It happens as to the body. The majority of illnesses, especially then, those of paralysis, are caused by lack of blood circulation. If the blood circulates well, man is robust and strong, he feels no disquiet, but if some irregularity begins in the blood circulation, indispositions, weaknesses and consumption begin. And if the circulation becomes quite irregular, he remains paralyzed, because that blood which does not circulate and does not flow rapidly in his veins forms the grave evils of the human nature. What would creatures not do if they knew that there is a remedy for the regularity of blood circulation? They would go who knows where to have it, so as to incur no malady. And yet, there is the great remedy of my will to avoid any evil of the soul, so as not to become paralyzed in good, but to grow strong and robust in sanctity. And who takes it? And still, it is a remedy given out for free, nor do they have to wander round in order to get it. Rather, it is always ready to give itself and constitute itself as the regular life of the creature. What sorrow, my daughter! What sorrow! Having said this, he disappeared.